Hi there everyone. So I wanted to record a brief instructional video that will help us out next week as we play our FishBanks simulation game. This shouldn't take too long, but sometime between now and when we meet next time, if you could take a look at kind of these are the rules of play and what to expect so that by the time we come into class, we're just ready to jump right in and start playing in your groups. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm excited to join the class. And so for this simulation game, we get to pretend that we are fishing companies and that we're competing for the resources that are in the ocean in order to make the most money. So I will kind of jump right in here and describe the rules of play and the system that we're working within. All right, so your role, as I said, is that you are a manager of a fishing company. So you and your team members are the managers, and you're competing with other local companies, that is, other teams in your class, to be able to fish the most fish, right, out of the ocean. Ultimately, your goal is that you want to have the highest total assets at the end. So your assets don't just include the money that you earn through your fish sales, but also it's going to include the value of the ships in your fleet. So you'll start out, everyone starts out with a certain number of ships, and you'll have the opportunity to buy or sell ships as the game advances, as the game moves along. And so however many ships are in your fleet, those get included in your assets as well. So how do you make money? It's pretty simple, right? So this model is pretty familiar to everyone probably. So the annual profit for your for your company is the difference between what you make or your income and your expenses or what it costs to keep your company going. Your income comes from a few sources. So like I said, your fish sales, of course, that's kind of the goal of a fishing company. Throughout the course of the game, you'll also have the opportunity to sell some of your ships if you're interested in doing that to make a chunk of money and invest elsewhere. So some of your income can come from ship sales. And also, just like any banking opportunity, you can have interest earnings on what you make. Your expenses then are your operating costs. So each one of your ships is going to cost some amount of money to operate, and that will change depending on where you place that ship, whether it's in the deep ocean, the shallow ocean, or even if you keep it in dock, you have to pay a little bit for the storage and maintenance of that ship. So those are your operating costs. You will also, just like you have the opportunity to sell some ships, if you're making good money and you want to, you will also have the opportunity to purchase some ships. You can purchase your ships in a couple of ways. So one, you can purchase them from auction, and those are used ships. Those are ships that typically come from other teams that are looking to sell theirs. Or you can place an order for a newly constructed ship, and that one has a little bit of a delay time. In other words, it's going to take about a year. You won't receive that ship until the next year round of play. And finally, you will have interest charges just as you can have interest earnings. So your fishing fleet is comprised of all of the ships that you have at your disposal that you can use. So you can add ships to your fleet by winning them at auction, meaning that you, just like a regular auction, you put up some amount of money that you're willing to pay per ship. Other teams will probably do the same, and whoever puts up the most cash will then win that auction and then receive their ships for payment. You also, like I said, have the opportunity to order new ships. Now, to take ships out of your fleet, you have only the opportunity to sell your ships at auction. So there's no variable in this particular simulation where you would lose ships to destruction or sinking ships or anything like that. It's your choice. You may sell your ships if you want to. Your fish catch. So your catch can be influenced by a couple of things. First of all, obviously, the more ships that you have in the ocean, the more fish you're going to catch. So there's a certain number of fish per ship that you will be able to that you will be effective in catching. The second variable there is ship effectiveness. Now, whether you choose to put your ship in the deep sea or the deep ocean or the shallow ocean, that will have an impact on your ship effectiveness. So you catch more fish in the deep ocean, you catch fewer fish in the shallow ocean. And of course, if you choose not to put a ship out for fishing, then that ship will catch 0 fish for that particular year. So those are the two things that you really get to make decisions on, is how many ships you have and where you want to put them. The third variable is a bit beyond your control, and it's pretty random, and that variable, of course, is weather. So this does mimic reality in that way. In some cases, our fishermen don't necessarily have a choice about how much fish they catch if the weather isn't friendly to their fishing activities. So you will feel the impacts of that sort of randomly from year to year. So this shows us a nice view of the interface that you'll be looking at on your computer. So if you're bringing a laptop with you, we'll just log you. Everything that we need is online, and so we'll log you in. No one else has to touch your computer but you. So your team can kind of gather around your computer and use it that way. So when you make your decisions, this is where the bulk of your information will be available. So the first thing we're going to look at over here is fleet value. So this tells you how many ships are in your fleet, basically how much each one is worth, and that'll tell you how much your fleet as a whole is worth. And then your bank balance, how much money or cash, right, you have available to you in the bank. And if you add those two up, that'll tell you what your total assets are. So for each round of play, you're going to kind of take a look at this box right here to give you an indication of how you're doing financially. And we'll talk about some of the other features in just a minute. So each year you're going to make a set of decisions, and then we will simulate that year and you see kind of how your decisions play out. So you're going to do these 7 things each year or each round of play. So the first thing you're going to do is check your dashboard, which is what we just took a look at. You'll record your final total assets for the prior year. Now by record, you can kind of record them on paper if you want to keep track of them that way, but they're also sort of tracked for you within the simulation. Really what you want to do is take note of that and use that to make decisions about purchasing or selling ships or where you want to put your ships in the ocean. The second thing you're going to do is go to auction. When you go to auction, that means that you'll have a chance to bid on ships if you want to, and this is also where people are able to put their ships up for sale. Then you'll check your tables and your graphs on all the other tabs, and I'll show you where those are in just a second, and that gives you a really good picture for not only how you're doing financially, but there are also indicators of, how many fish are in the ocean, what the weather has been doing. It gives you all sorts of information that might help you make a decision about where you want to put your ships. The fourth thing you'll do is determine your ship allocations. So you'll put some numbers in for how many you want to put in the deep sea, how many you want to put in the shallow ocean, and how many you would like to keep in harbors. Those are the big decisions that you're making each year. Finally, you will decide if you want to order some new ships. Now that's the last thing you do because you're not going to get those ships till next year anyway, because it takes a year to construct them. And then we'll simulate and we will see what the effect of your decisions happens to be, both on your income and also on the fishery and the sustainability of that. So taking this sort of step by step, the first thing you're going to do is check this dashboard. So here again, you see your total assets. You can take a look at that number and decide if you are able to sell or should sell ships, if you're able to buy them, and kind of figure out what you want to do there. Everyone starts out with 3 ships in their fleet to make decisions with. And you can put them in the harbor, the coast, or in the deep ocean. Step 2 is going to auction. So when we are actually at auction, you'll see a number pop up here. You'll actually kind of see a list of numbers. So you'll see the name of the team that is selling, how many ships they have up for auction, and what the minimum price they're asking for those ships might be. And then if there's more than one seller, you'll see another row, the number of ships they have and what the price is, right? So you'll have kind of that to choose from, and you'll be able to bid on them up here. And we'll kind of go through this for the first couple rounds of play. We'll take it kind of slow, and you'll be able to figure out what you're doing that way. The other thing that you can do is you can decide to sell some number of ships, and so you'll decide how many you want to put up for auction, and then you'll have a reserve price right here. You can make that offer. You should see your name pop up in this seller's row up here. Step 3, you want to check your tables and graphs. So you'll see the annual report, how the fishery is doing, so the health of the fishery, how many fish are there, what the ship market looks like, the auction history, etc. So you can use all of this information up here to kind of make your decisions about what you want to do per year. Finally, well, not absolutely finally, but next you're going to determine where you want to put your ships. And so this bar will be towards the bottom of the screen, and you can just type in your numbers right here. I want to put 1 in the harbor, 1 in the coast, 1 in the deep sea. Maybe you want to put all 3 in the deep sea, and 0 here, 0 here. Do be aware that when you make those decisions, it costs $250 to maintain a ship in the deep sea. It costs $150 to maintain a ship in the coastal area, and it costs $50 to keep a ship in the harbor. So that should be accounted for when making your decisions. Finally, you can order new ships if you want to. You're able to order a maximum of 50% of your current fleet. So if you have 4 ships, for example, in your current fleet, then you can order a maximum of 2 more at $300 each. And it takes the factory a year to build. You'll get those ships in the next round of play. And then we simulate and see what happens. How many fish will you catch? How will the weather impact your team? So what I want you to be thinking about this week is you want to develop your strategy, right? So if your goal is to have the highest total assets at the end, how will you sort of overall make decisions to achieve that goal? Are you going to be really aggressive? Do you take more of a wait and see approach? Do you go with incremental change? Just kind of think about that, and you'll be able to talk it over with your team for a few minutes before we start playing when we get together next week. So with your team, you'll discuss those strategies for buying and for placing ships that'll help you reach your goal. So this week, I'd like you to jot down a few notes before we meet all together on what you think your strategy should be. That way, when we get together in our groups, you can take about 5 minutes, share those strategies with each other, and hopefully come to some sort of an agreement. It is important to acknowledge that this simulation was developed not by me, of course, but by Dennis Meadows, who is a system dynamicist. It's put up online by the Forio company, so Forio Simulate, and we will use the rules of gameplay and the descriptions established by John Sturman. So, and I can talk more about that sort of development process and everything to you guys next week if you are interested in that. So, with that, I will leave you with this video to kind of watch and maybe even rewatch. I know that there are a lot of variables in the system, and it's a little bit tricky to kind of figure out how they all go together, but you'll see after a few rounds of play next week, you really will get the hang of it, and I hope that it will be a lot of fun. I will see you next week. Thanks.